Sliders used to be the thing in wedding filmmaking. If you've been doing this for more than 5 years, 6 years, before everyone had a gimbal, before gimbals became affordable, and really easy to use at weddings, all of us were using sliders to capture table details and various other parts of wedding days. It was the cool shot. But the question I have is, do sliders still have a place at the wedding day? And even more so, does a motorized slider have a place at a wedding day? This is the Trexo Slider. Let's check it out. Filmmakers are always looking to get an edge or do something different. And very rarely is there a piece of gear or a type of piece of gear that lets you actually do something unique and different. And, you know, you get a new gimbal and it's great and it's amazing, but really, does your stuff look that much different than your last gimbal? I do believe that a motorized slider is actually one of those pieces of gear that does create a look that is unique to itself. To me, that makes products like the Trexo Slider kind of interesting, because really, you can't imitate the look of a slider handheld or with a gimbal. It's not to say you need the look of a slider, but it's definitely a different thing. And so when I saw this being advertised, I was interested, so I reached out and I grabbed one of these because I wanted to do a review and say, okay, would I go through the trouble of using a slider if it allowed me to do something unique and interesting? As a filmmaker, that's what I'm always looking for, is will this allow me to create better work? And so that's what I really want to explore today. Not as much, is this slider good? But will it let you do something unique and interesting? Now, before we get into the review, I did want to say, Trexo did send us this slider because we requested it. They did not pay us, and they have not been allowed to review the video before its release. Trexo is a company I've never heard of before, but what made me interested when I saw the product is that it has a bunch of physical buttons on it. Previous motorized sliders, even small ones like the Edichrome Slider 1 motorized version, really relied more on the app, and for me at weddings, that's a no-go. I actually have some of the Edichrome motorized sliders, and while I think they're actually pretty cool, we don't use it at a wedding because of the setup. They're just not convenient. The thing I liked about the Trexo Slider for weddings is that it has these physical buttons. I think that is a real big game changer. Now, if you're wondering, what are the specs? What does it do? It's a slider. It's about 13 inches wide and it travels about 8 inches. It's not a ton, but I think if you use it well, 8 inches is plenty.
Nice.
It does have an app, but for this review, we're not really gonna be focusing on the app because I really don't think I would use the app at a wedding. If I was gonna take this out at a wedding, I'd pretty much use the buttons and menu exclusively. So we're really gonna focus on it the way a wedding filmmaker would use it. Let's talk about build quality. The Trexo Slider is very well built. It's sturdy, it feels very good. One thing to note, the paint is probably gonna rub off on this thing. I mean, this is from 2 times screwing it into a tripod. On the bottom, you have several 1/4-20 mounting points and then a 3/8 mounting point, which is typical for most tripods. It's also got a 1/4-20 mounting point on the side for vertical configuration. So the base package of this slider is just the slider. This is the Super Bundle. So the Super Bundle comes with this ball head, this phone mount, and the flex arm. Now here's what I'll say about this. This, I believe, is exclusively made for phones. It is not durable enough, especially when you're attaching the ball head. So don't think you're gonna be able to really sling your camera off. I don't think it's really designed for that. We didn't find it to be reliable. It kept falling over. This mechanism, it just wasn't beefy enough. That being said, if you put a phone on it or something like that, if you're looking at this for your phone, if you're a content creator where this is your primary way of making content, the flex arm is a pretty cool addition. This ball head is pretty much garbage and I would never use this, so we are using this, a much beefier ball head. So I would encourage you, if you do not have a beefy mini ball head, you're probably gonna wanna upgrade that and not use the one that comes with the case. All that to say, guys, for a wedding filmmaker, I don't think I would splurge for the super kit. If I was you guys, I would skip all the accessories and just go with the base package and then go ahead and, if you probably already have one of these, if not, grab yourself a mini ball head. It'll get the job done. Oh yeah, one more thing, get the legs too. You really gotta get the legs for this thing. It's not as useful without the legs. In terms of features, it has several modes, a menu button, loop, timeline, learning, incline on or off, and pairing. You can pretty much do whatever you really need to do at a wedding just from this menu right here. You can speed it up, you can turn on the looping. That's really, really beneficial because at weddings, you really don't have time to be taking it out and kind of opening up a phone and doing, well, maybe you have time, but I don't have time to be doing that. I'm just gonna take this thing out and press a button and go. The other thing I like about this one is that it has an internal battery. They say about 6 hours of use, and that's plenty of time for me at a wedding. You could do a time lapse, you could do whatever you needed to do with this slider. Speaking of a time lapse, it can go plenty slow to do a really compelling time lapse at a wedding, and I think that's actually one of the coolest uses. So let's talk about a couple shots that are unique to a slider like this. Certainly, like I said, you could get these types of shots with the Edelkrone or any other motorized slider, but like I said, the ability to just do it right on this menu right here, I think gives us a little bit of an edge at weddings. Two really specific use cases and maybe like a 2.5. The first one I would look at is time lapse. We're all familiar with time lapses and a lot of people have put them in their weddings, but I will say adding a little bit of motion to a time lapse with your slider actually is a really, really cool effect and I really like it a lot. That's kind of a niche use though, and I know a lot of people might not do that and you might not even have time to do it. I think where a motorized slider like this actually can be used in a lot of people's workflow is during macro details. And maybe if you want to do some stuff where you're kind of pushing in, going through the settings, if you want to get really crazy and use a probe lens, I think that's when you start unlocking some really interesting possibilities when you have a stabilizer like this. And that's when you got to really start looking at the motor speed and stability and noise. As you can see in this footage, it's got a little bit of micro jitters in there, but it's nothing severe. I'm able to get right in there with this macro lens. And some of these shots are just simply shots I could not get with a manual slider. Definitely not handheld and definitely not with a gimbal. The question is really, do I need these shots? Would I spend time setting these shots up? That's kind of a question for you, but I will say it's interesting. So as of today, if you head over to the Trexo website, the Trexo Slider base kit is $349. If you want to get the super bundle, it's around $449. That's all the accessories and whatnot. Now they do make a 3-axis head, which is a motorized head, which allows you to do really cool parallax stuff and even more complex time lapses. And that's $995 for that kit. If you want to help the channel and buy a Trexo slider, then head in the description, click on the link, and you can help us and you'll get yourself a cool slider. All in all, using it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Even the app works pretty simply. But once I figured out how the buttons worked and how they wanted me to navigate the menu, the double presses and the single presses and all that, it was actually really easy to use and I would feel confident to break it out at a wedding and just use it with no issues. So here's my final thoughts on this thing. First of all, pretty solid product. I do feel it's a little pricey for what it provides, not compared to other sliders that are similar on the market though. So if you're interested in a motorized slider, especially for weddings, I don't think you can do too much better than the Trexo slider. If you don't mind using an app, maybe go look at the Edelkrone Slider 1 motorized version. I think the build quality is a little better, the motor is a little stronger, and it's a little smoother in my opinion. But if your thing is macro detail shots, ring shots, or time-lapse shots, or anything like that, I don't see why you wouldn't add something like the Trexo Slider to your kit. I honestly think it's gonna unlock some shots for you. If that's who you are, you might as well go ahead and grab one. It's not crazy expensive, and I think the build quality is gonna last and stand up to the rigor of wedding filmmaking. If you enjoyed this review or you want to check out other wedding filmmaking content or gear reviews, or hey, we even have a podcast, then subscribe, like, share, hit the alert bell. We love helping wedding filmmakers. See you guys.